We're here. You were eagerly awaiting us. Yes, we started at 9 o'clock today for the first session of National Intern Week. And what a session this is going to be today. Samantha, hopefully you can hear me now. Just pop a comment in if there's any problems. But yes, my name's Heather. I'm from Career Map. I am your host this morning. This morning, we're going to be kicking off the week with a session from the team at Prospects. And I think it's going to be perfectly timed as it's going to really set the scene for the week by taking a real look into how internships work and what you need to do to give yourself the best chance of securing one. So the team will join the session shortly. I've just got a bit of housekeeping to do though. So just so you know, a lot of you have found it already. We've got a chat box on the right hand side of the screen. So as the session is going along, please ask any questions that you've got into that chat box, and then we'll do a Q&A with the team at the end of the session. So the last 15 minutes. It's also a nice reminder to know that the session is being recorded, so you don't blink and miss it. It will be emailed to you afterwards as well. So anything that you feel like you might need to refer back to will be in your inbox. But feel free to take any screenshots if you need anything in the immediate. But that's that from me. If I can just hand over to the team now. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, Heather. Good morning, everyone.
I'll pass over the baton and I will see you for the Q&A.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be kicking off Career Map's National Intern Week. As you'll know this already, there's some fascinating sessions lined up. And I think by the end of the week, you're going to be in such a strong position to secure the internship or placement that you want. And I think it's just worth pausing to reflect on just how important placements and internships are. And they have been for many, many years, but I think nowadays they're absolutely critical, which is why there are events like this, a whole week devoted to helping you orient yourselves towards getting an internship or a placement. They're very much, they mark the threshold of your future in terms of work. There's no simpler way of putting it. Just as going to university is a hugely significant moment, so is getting a placement, getting an internship, and work experience generally. Any kind of work experience is valuable. But we're going to be focusing on the two formal aspects of it, internships and placements. I'm joined by Anna White, who's a placement projects officer at the University of Nottingham, and Fatia Karlik, who was a placement student at Prospects and has built a career from that moment and works with us again at Prospects. And both of those are the real experts of this session. So I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of the internship and placement scene and hand over to them. And then, as Heather mentioned, we'll be having plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So please put in your thoughts into the chat as we go along, and we'll deal with as many of them as possible in the latter part of the session. Now, before we dive into the specifics, should say that from Prospects' point of view, we are here to support you every step of the way to help you build a bright future. And we always urge students and graduates to use our career planning tools, Career Planner and Job Match, because many of you will know this already, but you really, really need to get yourself in the right frame of mind when you start applying for jobs, for internships, replacements. And so much of that rests upon understanding about yourself and your interests and where you might want to go and what your degree can do for you and where it might take you. So Planner and Job Match sit at the heart of Prospects AC UK, free to use, and they are designed to help you reflect and understand the wealth of opportunities that lie ahead of you. Because that's a really important point. As a student and then as a graduate, there are actually more opportunities than you probably realise, because you do a degree in one subject that can take you in all sorts of different directions. And the purpose of these tools is to get you in front of more than 500 different occupational profiles, which are written by professionals in career services, people like Anna, who understand what it takes to get into certain types of jobs. So they're there to help and support you. So we do recommend that you start your journey, your career planning journey and your job hunting journey with these two tools at the heart of Prospects. Now, moving on to a question that comes up time and time again, and it's quite understandable why it does, which is, are internships and placements the same thing? because they both fall under the broad term work experience, and they are often used interchangeably. But there are some important differences, even though there's a lot of overlap. So for the purposes of what we're talking about today and for this week, internships, they're usually undertaken over the summer, during the holidays, or after graduation. So let's say a summer internship would probably typically last for the duration of the summer holiday period. They're really popular internships. They provide a great opportunity to get very, very valuable hands-on experience in a company or an organisation. They're not usually accredited by the university because they're often undertaken as a sort of independent action by the student or graduate with the employer or recruiting organisation. But they might be accredited by a professional body or other type of entity. So, for example, say you've done an internship over the summer in an accountancy firm, that experience could be recognised by the chartered body like the ACCA, and the same would apply in many other sectors. So internships tend to be undertaken independently, but obviously universities, and Anna will talk much more about this, university career services in particular, they will help you secure an internship and find an internship and prepare for one. Whereas placements, generally, they're undertaken as part of your degree. So they might be what's often called a year in industry. So they'll be an integral part of the course that you're doing, and often a very serious structured preparation for entry into a particular sector, an industry sector, or a type of job or occupation. So if you're doing a placement year, you're likely to be completing that as a sort of module that goes towards your degree. You receive academic credit for that. And they're very much tied in with the curriculum, with the department that you're studying in, and the relationships that the university has with local, national, regional employers will be very, very important when it comes to finding those placements and securing them. But there are some like universal points which are irrespective of whether you're doing an internship or a placement or any other kind of work experience. It's important that you take it seriously, that you apply in the right way, that you give yourself the best chance of getting the best possible opportunity, that you show the employer or the recruiter that you are focused on that particular vacancy or opportunity, that you're not just sending out a standard CV or covering letter for every single possible opportunity that you're applying for. And above all of that, once you've done it, it's the richness of the experience and how you talk about it, how you turn that into what's called employability values or assets. It's your ability to reflect on that. In that sense, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a year in industry or a month at a local recruiter or anything like that. It's how you translate that and turn that into value and how you're able to talk about it in a future application or in an interview. That's what really, really counts. So it's important to keep a record of your experience and get help and support in analysing it and turning it into future employability value, which is the kind of buzzword, but it's absolutely real and true, and it's important in education and in employment. It's worth saying that the connection between internships and placements and work experience and full-time permanent work once you've graduated is getting stronger all the time. And Fatty will talk from a personal perspective about this later on, but it seems to be getting more important every year. So we'll take some research from the Institute Student Employers, which is the representative body for many of the big recruiters of students and graduates, as the name suggests. Well, they estimate from surveys of their members that about 50% of interns or placement students will go on to work for that company once they graduate. So they've been working over a summer or as a placement year, etc., and around half of them will go back. Now, that makes sense, obviously, because if you look at your placement or internship experiences like a dry run for permanent recruitment, it's good for the student. It's also good for the employer because they've got to know you. They can assess that are you the sort of person, the sort of employee that they'll want to come back to. And the way that the programs are structured with employers who are good at providing work experience of all kinds, it will be really gearing you up for permanent work. And coming back to that point I just made about the richness of the experience and how you reflect on that, every opportunity that you have during your placement and internship to get to know people, to build your network, to acquire skills outside of the area that you've gone into work, all of that will stand you in very, very good stead for future work in that company or organisation or anywhere else, frankly. because basic truth is employers frankly expect work experience now in a way that they probably didn't 20 or 30 years ago. It's always been an advantage, but not necessarily an absolute requirement. But not to worry, if you manage to get through the university experience without having secured an internship or replacement, you can do it as a graduate as well. Graduate internships are now a common part of the scene as well. So employers understand that you need to have that trial run, if you like, before the permanent thing, whether you're a student or a graduate. And the provision matches the demand, if you like. The IC has also done its surveys which show that the majority of their members, 82% in the last survey of large graduate recruiters, report that they do recruit interns or placements. In the last year, that was up from 75% in the previous year. Now, around the time of the lockdown crisis, of course, internships and placements were hit. There's a big rush to virtual ones, but there was not the compensatory provision across the board, but it has climbed back to typical levels now, and it is in fact growing. It's always becoming more and more important. As you'd expect, it's competitive. So ISC members report the average recruiting organisation receives 26 applications for every single hire, and the competitive landscape means that it's all the more important that you make the best possible case for yourself and do the best possible job. It's always worth remembering that if you have got yourself in a position where you're trained and you've done exercises and you've got all the support it's possible to get from your career service particularly, or from other interested parties, you will be giving yourself an advantage, because many students still don't observe that best practice and may let themselves down by not doing a tailored application or making basic errors in the CV, the sorts of things that with a bit of care and attention you can eliminate, and therefore those 26 applications per hire, well, actually it's possible around half of them might not be giving themselves the best chance. So everything you do to make your application focused, tailored, spot on, accurate, rich in quality, gives you every opportunity of getting that opportunity in those placement and internship firms. I'll also mention, before we move on to the next short section, about international internships. Always a popular option, and again have restored themselves since the decline around 2020 and 2021. So you can look across prospects and other provider sites for companies like the Intern Group or Bunac, Camp America, large traditional providers of international opportunities. Teaching abroad is a very popular internship choice. So you have companies like Chatteris Education and Fewer Things, amongst a number of specialist providers who set up, manage and run and enable students and graduates to go and teach internationally. Tremendous experience for many people. But again, whether you're doing your internship thousands of miles away or down the road, it's the same valuable experience, and it all comes down to what you do with it and how you convert that into employability value. Need to say something about the perennial question of pay. So unpaid internships have been a bugbear for many, many years, and they're still an issue. If you're a placement student doing a program as part of your course, that is going to be looked at very differently. You're a student and you are doing a program of study, and you don't sit under the same category of law as a graduate or a student doing an internship, where basically if you're doing work, paid work, or work that would normally be paid for, you should be paid for it. However modest that work is, as soon as you start doing work in that context, under law, you're a worker. Now, there are certain industries which for many years have been associated with unpaid internship. Not every employer in these sectors by any means, but some. Fashion and media in particular have got a record for providing unpaid internships. And the basic logic behind it is there's a belief that students will be so keen to get the experience that they'll trade payment for getting that experience. But really, you have to know your worth as a worker and an employee, and always push back when it comes to an unpaid internship opportunity. And you should expect to be paid for it. And if you have that sense of yourself and that self-worth at the start of your working life, well, it stands you in the best possible stead for future permanent work opportunities, because you have to expect to be paid for doing work. It's as simple as that. And there's a wealth of advice that career services can provide in particular, and financial support and welfare officers at university. So if you're ever unsure about your status in respect of paid work, get advice and support before you dive in and take something which basically is expecting you to trade payment for experience, however brilliant the experience is and however useful it is. So a couple of things about the world of hybrid and virtual work experience. Of course, this was accelerated in 2020, and most work experience now will be possibly a combination of what you might call hybrid, i.e. face-to-face and a bit online. A small amount of work experience, according to ISC research, is 4% of it is totally online. 37% of placement programs at the moment are face-to-face, and 33 are hybrid, that mixture of face-to-face and virtual. None of this will be new to you as a student who you're probably having a certain amount now even of online study or hybrid study. It's a normal part of work now. So when you come to do full-time work, it's likely that some of that time may be spent at home. Depends on the job you're going into and the sector, of course. But certainly in our experience of prospecting JISC and the career service that Anna works for, and many other types of work, it's a combination. The benefits of that, whether it be internships, placements or work, are in terms of time management, flexibility. To get the best out of it, you need to be proactive. You need to be taking opportunities when you do come into work. And you should expect that you will have to come into the workplace, and you would want to come into the workplace too. It'd be difficult to imagine doing an internship or certainly permanent work where you never got to meet the people that you work with, your colleagues, etc. So most employers will manage it in a hybrid way, with varying degrees between that. So you need to expect that some of the time as an internal placement may be spent working outside of the office. And these are all questions and factors that you need to be clear about at the outset, and you need to be confident that you can manage. That's all part of the management of yourself in becoming a worker in the workplace. Hybrid internships and hybrid placements are a big part of that preparation now, but it's a normal part of the world of work now and is likely to stabilise for the foreseeable future. And finally, just the voice of a student, and I think it sums up so much about how to go about what your approach should be. The keyword there for me is passionate, being passionate about what you're applying for, what you're going to do. And it does, as they said, your passion will shine out. It does show. For recruiters, you can tell when somebody's serious and keen and enthusiastic. That comes through your application, it comes through your interview, and it also shows when you're actually doing work. So you have to have that drive, energy, enthusiasm, because that's going to be the way that you learn about the work that you're doing, learn about other people, and have the confidence and the ability to communicate that is going to set you up, as all placements and internships do, set you up for a successful future working life. At that point, with the overview done with, I will hand over to Anna, who will talk about the reality, the tactics and the particulars of how you go about doing all of that. So over to you, Anna.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here with you, and thanks very much, Chris. Okay, so first of all, the value in doing an internship. So Chris has talked about some of these things already. So to summarise, essentially, to do an internship, you are demonstrating practical skills. They might be industry specific as well if you have a career in mind. So it's a great way of demonstrating those practical skills, but also demonstrating those soft skills. So things like communication, which breaking down is things like listening, presenting, or time management. These are all really important things that employers want to see that you've done. And if you've got an internship, you can demonstrate that you have done those things and that you're interested in building them as well. You're also, by doing an internship, if it's in a specific area that you're looking to kind of progress with, you're demonstrating a commitment to that. It's also a great way of kind of getting in with a company that you're serious about working for. But primarily, as Chris has already mentioned, it's about exploration. So I really would echo that sentiment of choose something that you're interested in, have a think about what you're good at and what you'd like to explore. So it's a really, really great way of exploring your interests and your strengths, as well as things that you maybe want to try out getting better at before you enter the graduate world of work. So the sorts of, I've seen a couple of questions pop up around this too in the chat. So the sorts of employers that offer internships, essentially all sorts of employers offer internships, from large multinationals and government departments to SMEs and to startups. So their rationale is essentially to promote themselves to you as a future worker. They work quite closely with universities. So a lot of universities, there's careers fairs where employees come and they kind of set out their stall literally to students. And they're essentially looking to build relationships with talented students and graduates so that you'll come and work for them when you finish university. That's called a talent pipeline in the jargon. So a few things to know: big companies, they tend to advertise internships early. So if you're looking to get an internship with a large company, you're going to want to be looking from about September onwards. Companies are they're often looking for future talent, and that's quite a big investment. So they really do take recruitment quite seriously. Depending on the sector, employers tend to look to convert around 40% of their internships to future hires when we talk about large companies. But smaller companies, SMEs or startups, they kind of recruit in a different way. They haven't got the same weight behind that. So they tend to recruit at different points during the year. And the best thing to do is to seek out opportunities and look at what they're asking for. And yeah, it's often at multiple times during the year. So how do internships differ? So as I've just mentioned, large companies have got more kind of infrastructure around this. So they may have quite a slick rotation program where you get to see different parts of the business and you get to sample a few different streams. Large companies, a pro of kind of doing an internship with a large organization is that they tend to put you in front of a lot of people and try different things. But there are some real benefits to working for smaller organizations too. So you may make more impact during your internship within a smaller organization. And you may also have access to more senior people more quickly. So it can be a kind of different learning experience, I suppose I'd say. Paid versus unpaid. Chris has already gone through this, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I just want to echo that if you're working as an employee, you should be being paid. That's my opinion, it's my employer's opinion. And there are some exceptions rather. So if you're doing work experience that is actually voluntary, or there are some schemes where you're doing work experience alongside your studies, but it's not a formal internship. So there are some exceptions. But if you're not sure whether you're being exploited or not, you can check the government guidance on national minimum wage and internships. And I've got a link I can put in the chat for later. But my own experience, I've worked for a large multinational employer before I came to work at a university. And I remember when I was there, I was really curious about what it would be like to work in a different environment. I went to work for a small IT startup, and I'm really, really glad I did that because it helped me to get an understanding of the sort of environment that I want to work in, and made me aware of the pros and cons of the small startup. There was a dog under my desk that was very nice, but there was no canteen to go and eat lunch in. I had to go and sit out on a bench in the cold because I was working in somebody's house. So there's always pros and cons, and it's great to explore that for yourself and find out what you enjoy. So where can you find an internship? So this is often the hard part of gaining work experience, is knowing where to look, and especially when you're at the start of your university journey or you're in college. There are so many different ways and platforms that it can feel quite overwhelming. So this is the only slide I've got that has kind of words on it, but I put it together because I thought it's one of those where you potentially do want to kind of have a bit of an organized view of how you can organize your search. So here we are. So of course, I'm going to mention prospects. So the jobs boards are a great way to look for internships. They are, obviously places where you can see a lot of different things. Broad jobs boards, prospects is fantastic. I use prospects a lot when I'm working with students as a port of call. There's also others, Bright Network, ratemyplacement.com, which is a bit like TripAdvisor for internships, so you can see what other students have said about it. But there's also industry-specific jobs boards. So if you've got a career in mind, there are industry-specific jobs boards. My first job in film, there's so many examples. I wasn't going to go through them all, but that might be a great place to focus your search if that's what you want to do. There are also jobs boards for targeted demographics. So there's a few examples there, but they can be fantastic ways to work with employers who are supportive of students from those demographics and are actively looking to recruit students more from to create a more diverse workforce. So that's also a great option. So social media, increasingly students are finding work experience on social media. To me, as a millennial, that sounds quite stressful because I associate social media with not necessarily professional life, but increasingly it's just more and more common that there's that overlap. So obviously LinkedIn is still the main professional platform, but also I've had students have find work experience. A student found an editorial position in publishing through Twitter, TikTok. So essentially my tips for that is just make sure your profile's cleaned up and is something that you'd like to show to a future employer, and follow influencers and pages in your industry to kind of get an idea of what's out there. Use hashtags to find experiences. Yeah, that's how I would go about that. So the third thing I would say is absolutely use your network. So family, friends, anybody that you know, even quite tentatively. People really don't mind talking about this sort of thing. If you approach somebody and say, I'm really interested in just getting a bit of work experience in this, do you know anybody? Or I know you work with this organization, or you know somebody, a couple of days. It's really a really important resource to tap. And if you don't have a network, or you don't know anybody in an industry that you're interested in, please do use your career service. So it's set up to help you with these connections, and most career services will have some sort of alumni mentoring scheme where they can put you in touch with people who have been in your position, potentially at your university, and are now working across a range of sectors and industries. So I would absolutely recommend going to speak to your career service. Speculative applications. So this is something that people can feel quite shy about, to be honest, but I really, really encourage students to make speculative applications. And what that means is essentially, rather than waiting to see an internship advertised, you approach an organisation that you're interested in and you ask if they have anything that you can do. So the only thing I would say is with the approach, don't be too vague, be quite clear about the sort of work that you'd like to take, and about your availability. Try and be flexible, but say, don't say you're available when you're not. Just make it really easy for them to see who you are, what you've got to offer, what you're looking for, and when you can work. And that has been successful. I've worked with a lot of students, so that's been successful. So I would really, really encourage that. I don't want to spend too long on this slide because we've got a lot to get through, but I work for the University of Nottingham. I can pop this link in the tab, but your career service will also have resources around where to look. But yeah, I'll move on. Okay, so preparing for the internship. So once you've done the hard work and you've found one and you've applied and you've been accepted, you should be feeling very pleased with yourself. A few practical steps around preparing. So first of all, know who you're reporting to on your first day, and know where you're supposed to be. Have a think about the route to work and plan a little bit of a contingency in case there's some delays or cancelled buses or anything. You want to arrive on the first day feeling very unflapped and very kind of confident. If it's a virtual internship, I guess the same applies, but virtually, know what time you're logging on, who you're speaking to, what your plan is, and make sure that you're there nice and early. Mental preparation. So I would say, this is quite a large area, but I would say that take the pressure off yourself. So this is work experience. You're there to learn and you're there to grow, and nobody's expecting the finished product from you in terms of, somebody who's got more experience than you have. It's about building that experience. So take the pressure off. And if you can adapt a growth mindset, that's fantastic. It will just mean that you are focused more on what you can learn as opposed to trying to minimize mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. They're good. They're an opportunity to learn. So yeah, take the pressure off. And just remember that everybody's been in your position and nobody's judging you. They just want you to succeed. Okay, so if you don't do any work experience when you're at university, so first of all, I would say do try. It's a really great time to do some work experience. You're exploring the world, you're building your studies, you're building your skills. There's also a lot of people around to support you, both your peers and your career service. There are some university-led schemes typically while you're at university that make it a little bit easier for you to gain work experience. So again, at the University of Nottingham, but this will apply to other universities, we have sort of schemes that are designed to give you your first work experience without anything prior, and specifically organised around that. So yeah, it can be a really, really great springboard. If you might be doing some paid work while you're at university. So if you've got a part-time job, you'll be developing transferable skills there. You might be doing some students' union activity, you might be in a sports team, societies. All of that stuff builds leadership skills, coaching skills, all of that sort of thing. So think about what's taking up your time when you're at university, and just think, you will be building up skills. It's just that you're probably not calling it formal work experience. So at some point you will probably be building some experience that you can translate to your first work experience. Graduate internships are absolutely an option, as Chris has said. So it depends on you and the industry you're trying to get into, but they can be a great way for graduates to gain some work experience, consolidate skills, and get a feel for a particular industry or job. Graduate internships, slight downside is they may not be paid as highly, or they might be quite a short-term contract versus a graduate role. So again, I would say use your network. While you're at university, talk to everybody about what they're doing. Work experience and money shouldn't be a taboo subject. So do talk to people about what they're doing, and it can give you some great ideas. Okay, so after your internship, I really can't emphasize this enough. Absolutely want to echo Chris, is that reflection is such an important part of this. So it's not about just showing up to the internship, doing it, and then coming back. If you can possibly think about what you've been doing, and think about what you enjoyed on your internship, what you didn't, what you could have possibly done differently. If anything was challenging, think about why it was challenging and what you did to overcome it. There are some great tools as well to help you to do this. So if you're thinking like reflection, that sounds quite nebulous. There's some great tools. Have a Google, speak to your career service. You can write a diary, do a video to yourself, a voice note, but it's all about kind of thinking through your experience and thinking about what you've learned and what you'd like to try, what you could do differently, and then what you could try next time with your next step. So planning your next move after your internship ends. Once you've done your reflection, think about whether you want to explore the same sector, maybe a different one. Maybe you'd like to do something very similar, but you'd like a bit more responsibility. You've grown your network, potentially keep in touch with those people, keep connected on LinkedIn, or keep email addresses so that further down the line you might be able to approach them again. I would say absolutely kind of focus on your studies as well. That's really important. You want to come out of the university with a great grade, but the work experience will really, really support you. Employers really, it's pretty much a prerequisite most of the time, some form of experience to be considered competitive. So yeah, really do try your best, but don't worry if you don't manage to do it at university. There are always options. The doors aren't going to be closed to you. Finally, I would just say, to leverage that experience and what you've learned from it, you really want to be writing a great application for your next opportunity. So again, use your career service if you're not sure. CV application support is always available. Make the most of it. It's a great resource while you're at university, and I wish I had taken more advantage of that when I was a student. And now I work for it, and I'm constantly kicking myself at how much easier I could have made it myself. But best of luck. My final slide is just, I wanted to kind of summarize my 3 takeaways. So I just wanted to emphasize, don't worry about finding the perfect opportunity, try and be strategic, but essentially just look for something that you're excited about or curious about and you want to explore. Do tailor your applications for every job. So I know that it sounds like an awful lot of work. Unfortunately, you do need to write a new application per opportunity, per job, per internship, if you want to be considered. It's still a competitive field, and as Chris said, a lot of people won't be doing that. So if you can make sure that your application is tailored, spelt well, grammar's good, you're being specific about what you're looking for and what you can bring, that really will set you apart. Definitely make sure you're in the running at least. And finally, the reflections. I've worked with hundreds of students before, during and after their internships, and no one has ever had a piece of work experience or an internship or placement they can't take something away from. So it's all about learning about yourself and the world of work. Okay, that's me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anna. So hi, my name is Fatiha Kalik and I work for Prospects. And as Chris mentioned earlier, I've done a few work placements that I'd like to share with you, share the experiences, share how I found them, what I gained, and just to give you all a boost really, to tell you there are opportunities out there and the best ways to find them. So why was work experience important for me? I first started my work placement, the first one, many moons ago, maybe 20 years ago, and I knew how important it was back then to stand out from the crowd. I knew that once I graduated from my degree, I'd need something to offer different. I just didn't want to graduate and have no work experience. I wanted to be able to offer something to a company. So I identified that from an early stage and I thought, right, I really need to get on the career ladder. I really need to get something on my CV. So I started searching. So what I did was write speculative covering letters, as Anna mentioned, is something that you should do. Think about what you're after. I mean, you can say I want work experience, but which area do you want to work in? What's important for you? What do you want to get out of it? So for me, it was important to gain skills that I knew were transferable in the workplace. So I was looking in a variety of sectors, but one of the key ones for me was media. At 20 years old, I think it was, I was interested in working in the media. So I was thinking, right, so media is such a big sector. Where do I start? You've got TV, you've got radio, you've got publishing. It's just so vast. So what I thought was, well, I'll try and work in each one. And, so one of the things I did was look around me, see what companies were around me and just ask myself, is this what I want? So that's how I started. And so again, it was important for me to get on that career ladder and have something to offer when I graduate. So what did I do? How did I get started? As I said before, I was interested in working in the media. So I wanted to work in TV to start off with. So, I mean, living in Manchester, there was Granada, there's BBC. So what I did was try to obtain contacts in each of these areas, and then emailed them and wrote letters. And it was a long process, writing speculative covering letters and emails. You had to be specific in what you're looking for. You had to tell them what you can offer them, and you also have to say what you wish to gain from this. But I mean, I knew at the time a lot of people who were working in media were offered jobs via work experience and networking. So I knew that this was something that I had to do. So what did I do to get started? I actually, at college, studied media studies, and I really, really enjoyed it. The other subjects that I studied were classics, IT, psychology. And one day when I was at college, I came across something called the BBC Mentor Project. And basically, it was a scheme where 12 students were matched up with 12 mentors over a period of 9 months. And they were mentored over the course of the scheme. You were given a budget of like £1,000, and you had to go out there and you had to basically, at the end of the 9 months, you had to produce a short piece. So when I read about this scheme, I thought, oh, this sounds really good. I would love to be on this scheme. At the time when I was reading it, I realized the deadline was like the next day or the day after for the application. So obviously, as you can imagine, I was in a bit of panic. I thought, I really want this scheme, but the deadline's tomorrow. I mean, I thought, does it look bad that I'm applying for it last minute? But anyway, I wrote the application. I didn't post it because I thought it wouldn't get there on time. went to the BBC myself, handed it in at reception, and I said, please, can you give this to the relevant department? 2 weeks later, get a letter in the post, and then it was an invitation for interview. So I was like, okay, wow, first step. So I've got an interview now, so I really need to prepare for this. You know, what can I offer? Getting all, you know, I was practicing all my questions, practicing all the answers that I could give. So I went to the interview, found out that 1,200 people had applied for the scheme, and there were 12 people that were going to be selected. So I thought, this is really competitive. How can I stand out from the crowd? You know, we were being observed in group activities. You were being observed how you spoke with each other. You know, you were being observed as, are you a good leader? Are you a good team member? So thankfully I passed all that, and then I got onto the scheme, which was a big achievement in itself. My mentor that I was matched up with was a Radio 5 live producer, who, funnily enough, all these years later, I'm still in touch with. And I was really, really keen to get as much out of the project as I could, but he was as well, which was really nice. My mentor really wanted me to get the most of working in the BBC whilst I had my foot in the door, which was really, really helpful. And I think you'll find that on work placements as well, you're really eager to get something out of a placement, but your employer on most occasions really wants you to do well, and wants you to make the most of it as well. So they will also offer you opportunities. If you are offered opportunities, make the most of it, accept them. So I basically was on this mentor project. I worked in a group of 4 or 5 people. We were given a budget and we made a documentary, which we showcased at the end of the 9 months. Over the course of 9 months, we had training sessions, we were put on projects, we were put on courses. Now that I had a staff ID at the BBC, I was thinking, I don't know when I'm going to get this chance again. So I spent my free time in the library doing courses, which producers were doing, directors were doing. I thought, I really want to make the most of this whilst I've got access. So I was doing that at the same time as doing the project. But also my mentor used to call me up sometimes and said, hey, Fatia, I'm going to be going down to Bolton tomorrow to a club. And with me, I'll be taking an Arsenal footballer to help me interview. Would you like to come along? And it's like, how can you say no? So I did things like that as well. So I went and observed and helped with the interview, watched how he edited the program afterwards, and then watched it go live as well. You know, and that was really, really good insight into how a radio production was made. So, like I said, once I got my foot in the door, I was inquiring about other departments. I was inquiring about contacts. I contacted people to ask for shadowing opportunities. Many people happily accepted. I went behind the scenes of a few TV shows, and it was just a really, really good insight. And whilst I had all this access, I think one of the most important things for me was I really wanted to gain the skills. I really wanted to take away something from this work experience, not just to observe, not just to see how it's all done, but really develop myself as a person. And one of the things, I mean, I was pushed, I was really pushing myself to get the most out of it. And one of the things that I did was volunteer on a road show. There was basically a radio GMR Greater Manchester bus that travels around Manchester, connects with the local community. And through one of the contacts I made through networking, I volunteered on this bus. When I volunteered on this bus, the organizer said, hey, I know someone who works in BBC Radio. If you'd like to do some work experience there, of course. So I then had a meeting with somebody in BBC Radio. They asked me if I would like to produce a short feature for BBC Video Nation, which then I did. It got edited and then put onto the BBC website. And as if that wasn't enough, they also gave me a little recording radio thing. And then they sent me out into my local area to gather local stories, which were then edited and used in BBC shows. So whilst I spent 9 months on the scheme, I was really, really making the most of my 9-month placement there, and seeing what opportunities were available for me. It taught me skills like budgeting skills, negotiation skills, people skills, and really gave me a massive insight into working for the BBC. when I completed that, I then got involved in volunteering, and I completed 200 hours of volunteering with Millennium Volunteers and CSV Media. It was a short time, but it involved creating newsletters, completing courses every Saturday, and helping to fundraise for charities too. So fast forward a few months, I then started university in 2002, and I wanted to gain work experience to help me stand out from the crowd. And it was the 4-year course that I did. It was a sandwich degree. So my third year would be a year's internship. And if you think about it, you're doing a year internship with hundreds of other students on your course. You really need to make a head start on thinking about where you want to work and getting those opportunities before other people, get them instead. So at the time, I was already doing a part-time job anyway, just to get a bit of money in as I was a student. And I worked for a company called Loot Newspapers, and they had a print publication where people would submit adverts, and it would get published in the newspaper. It was basically like a print version of eBay, and people are just selling things. So my role was editing the adverts for submission. So that involved fixing typos, errors, grammatical errors. In all honesty, it wasn't really a job that I enjoyed. It was more of a weekend job for me. So, but at the same time, adding it to my CV and saying this is what I currently do as a part-time job, it did, put me in good stead. So when I started university, like I said, I inquired about the university magazine and I started writing for it. So I was attending meetings, I was writing articles, and I also kept in touch with my media at the same time. And in my free time, I was shadowing them on TV shows such as Too Many Cooks, which was, it wasn't that popular, but the celebrity chef was Gino D'Acampo. So I was still doing that. And then in 2004, I started an internship at Graduate Prospects, who I'm representing today as well. And that was as part of my business IT course. Now, you just heard me say business IT, and you're probably thinking, but she's wanted to work in media. It's because I wanted to come into working in publishing and media through a different angle. So I did business, but I wanted to keep my options open, which is why I didn't do a full-on media degree from the get-go. How did I find this opportunity? Well, I went to my career services. I saw a publication called Prospects Work Experience Magazine. Turn the page, there was an advert and it said, come work for us, we've got a workplace internship. So I read about it and I thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's got everything in a nutshell. This is really what I want to do. So I did my application. I really researched the organisation, really researched what do Graduate Prospects do. And I just knew I had to try my best to try and secure it. So what I did, thankfully I was invited for interview. I made a portfolio of all my achievements and what I'd done on my course so far, and also all the work experience that I'd done prior, which really, really helped me. Well, I mean, they seemed quite impressed, but it really helped me in my application. Another thing that I did at the same time in 2004, which only took 3 days out of the entire year, but it was volunteering at the National Badminton Championships as an assistant in the press office. It basically involved talking and interviewing players, recording results, assisting journalists in the media room. Thankfully, in this 3-day volunteering placement, I'd made a good impression. So then the press officer asked me to come back, and I did that for the next 4 years, every summer for 3 days a year. So whilst I was still studying at university, I was still in the background, adding to my experience. And I also did the same for the National Squash Championships because I'd been recommended. So that's a really good example of networking as well, and just making sure that you're finding out what opportunities are out there. Moving on, so achievements and highlights. So work experience, I think, it's just so highly recommended. And from someone like me, I would definitely encourage everybody to at least try it and at least once. It's just so important now as well. When I did my year placement at Graduate Prospects, honestly, I took away so much from it, and I'm really thankful as well. It was a really valuable experience. I got to see basically what was involved in publishing a magazine from start to end. So I learned about how different teams are involved in publishing a magazine, sales, marketing, design. And I also was given the opportunity to publish 3 issues of, we had a magazine back then called Prospects Finalist, under the guidance of my peers. And it was such a lovely feeling and sense of achievement to see my name printed in thousands of applications that were distributed across the country. And knowing that I was responsible for product managing the publications as a placement student and liaising with external stakeholders to make sure they were delivered on time, on budget. So it basically gave me such a big insight into how everything was done. As well as that, I still did complete other tasks, such as creating and sending newsletters to students, attending recruitment fairs, processing invoices, and other admin tasks. So this placement, as you can see, I was really getting my fingers, I was literally getting stuck in different areas and asking questions as well, which is really important. Ask questions. If you're interested in working in a specific area, ask questions. If you're interested in seeing how something's done, ask questions. So once the placement year was done, I returned to university in September 2005 to complete my final year. So I had a good 10 months of studying. And then when I finished the course, literally a few days later, I was then offered a graduate level job with Graduate Prospects. I honestly don't think that I would have been offered that graduate level job if I hadn't done that work experience and was able to showcase my skills, because I'd already gone into the company, made a stamp, said, this is who I am, this is what I do. And they saw it, and they saw the work, what I did on the work experience placement as evidence that I was doing that. So as you can imagine, I was chuffed to bits when I was offered the graduate level job. So I think I started, because it was a busy time for Graduate Prospects at that time when print was quite big. It was a busy summer. So I went straight into it, started helping the other product managers publish the publications. As time went on, I developed my skills. You know, I was taking on more tasks and responsibilities. I helped out with NCWE, the National Council for Work Experience, as a judge to give an insight. So that was a big achievement as well. And again, like I said, mentioned earlier, I attended like events and things like that. So how did it work experience improve and change my career? So I was able to get an insight and get direct experience in many areas, which helped me to see which areas I enjoyed the most. Although I was interested in working in media, like I said before, I did study a business IT degree to come into it from a different angle. Before we finish off, I just want to say if there's anything I could do differently, what would I do? And just a few tips, but I think Anna and Chris have already covered them, so I won't go into them, so we can leave some time for questions. Speculative covering letters, be specific. What role do you want? Do your research and think about what is it that you want to gain from it. Don't say the wrong things. For example, I'm only doing it for the money. I'm only doing it because it's a course requirement. Do work experience because you really do want it to work for you. Another thing, a work placement, it's still a job, so you've got to follow the rules. You can't think I'll turn up when I want. I won't be punctual. It's just a work placement. A work placement is still something really, really big. So follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, it's just a reflection of what you are as a person, you know. Know your limits. Don't overwork yourself. Do what you can, but know your limits and know your boundaries. Set achievable targets and don't be hard on yourself if things don't work out. Very important, be willing to learn and be punctual. Make a good first impression from the moment you turn up to the time when you're leaving the door. Make a good impression. Get to know people, smile, ask people how they got their jobs. People love to be asked questions like them. Make suggestions on how to improve things if you want to. Companies love suggestions. And lastly, keep trying and don't give up. There are hundreds of opportunities out there. It's just about going about it in the right way, finding them, seeking them. Don't give up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hand
That was
over to
absolutely
Hannah.
wonderful. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant, fantastic. Wonderful. And there's been absolutely loads of questions come through, and I'm not going to waste any time in entering the chat, really. There's been a lot of questions that have covered already, but one real common theme that I think we should at least pay a bit of attention to for a couple of minutes is CVs. So there's been a lot of questions around what can I do to make sure my CV stands out, or if I don't have any work experience already, what can I put on there, that kind of thing. I know that this could be a session in itself, but do you have any tips of what people can consider when they're starting out with this?
I can go if, yeah. So yeah, CVs, first thing I would say is if you have got no experience at all, but you're looking to build a CV, start with what you have in terms of interests and hobbies. Anything that you've done, anything you've got involved in during school, reading buddy schemes, working, helping, volunteering in the library, mentoring other students, working on a school paper, anything that you've got, put it in there, but try and organise it as best you can so that you're demonstrating the things that you're interested in, that you want to kind of go forward with. Building a kind of LinkedIn profile, I think, is a good thing too, because that's just increasingly been used and it's more visible, and it allows you to look for opportunities too. But I would say CVs can be quite industry specific. So there are some sectors that will potentially want a one-page CV, some sectors that will want you to organise it in terms of very relevant experience to that. I'm thinking of media and creative industries. Because we don't have much time, I think I would say research the sorts of sectors and the kinds of CVs they would be looking for. And if you want some help, go to your career service, because they'll be able to give you really tailored advice for the area that you're looking for.
And I think that's something that I definitely wanted to pull out of this, actually, because there's been so many questions, and I do think that we've managed to cover most of them. But I think it's really important to say that the career service is there to support, aren't they? So absolutely, you go and have a chat with somebody. I mean, obviously it's over to you with your level of expertise, but I'm right in saying that, aren't I? So
absolutely, yeah. All the specific questions, I really would say that you'll have somebody within your career service who's pretty expert in that niche. So absolutely use their experience. It's a great resource. You're paying for it indirectly whilst being at university, because you're paying for everything that you have there. So do use it.
And that's another thing I wanted to actually ask as well. There are a couple of questions around what to do after a master's. So even if you are a postgraduate student, could you still go to the career service and ask and have that advice?
Absolutely, yes. My university has a specific postgraduate sort of area of people who are specifically, I think some people, and it can depend on the masters, but you will need to do similar things to an undergraduate to demonstrate your your skills to an employer. So you'll have potentially kind of more refined skills in certain areas like research, but you will be doing, absolutely, they'll support postgraduates. Often a lot of career services support you for about a year or maybe more after you've graduated too. So
wonderful, that's really helpful. And in terms of other questions, I think it'd be quite good to clarify, even though, Fateh, you spoke an awful lot around your experience and the fact that you did internships and work experience very early on before ever embarking on university. But is that still the case? Can you do an internship straight after A-levels and after college? Can we just clarify that that's okay? Because there was still a couple of questions around that. So, yeah, can you just confirm when you can start applying to an internship?
That's me, yeah?
Oh yes,
sorry.
no, I would say,
sorry, I'm not being very clear.
No, that's fine. I would say that you would need to look at what the internship is asking for. So some will want students, university students, and some will want potentially graduates. So have a look at what they are asking for. If it doesn't say, absolutely, you get in contact and say, I'm studying my A-levels. I've got all this, all this to offer. Unless it says specifically no, I would assume that the door is open and that you can have that conversation.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think it's also, it sits with the increasing availability of what we might call school and college leaver programs. So large firms that at one time would have probably only really taken on graduates for their early careers, increasingly are also interested in recruiting students leaving school and college after A-levels, for example. So I think, yeah, Anna's absolutely right. It's possibly available, and you just need to ask the right questions.
Wonderful. Well, it's time for me to wrap up the session. We've met our 10 o'clock deadline. I personally would like to say thank you to the panel for such an insightful and interesting and really inspiring session. And I hope that the audience has felt that too. We've had some great feedback in the comments already. So thank you to the team here, the panelists, and thank you to everybody who's logged in today and asked their questions. And I think, like we've just said, anything that you feel like you still want to ask or maybe didn't get answered in the way that you wanted, or you'd like a bit more information on, please go to your careers service because they can support you. And in terms of this session, it is available on demand, so you will have it emailed to you in the next couple of days. But yes, thank you everybody, take care, and yeah, see you again for another session during Intern Week.
Good luck, everybody. Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.